Hello learners, now we will continue with our study of David Copperfield. In our earlier section, we had looked at the life and times of Charles Dickens, his works, the story of David Copperfield, the various characters in the novel, how the novel is a Kunstlerroman, how the novel is a Bildungsroman, the autobiographical elements present in the novel, the impact it had on various authors. Now, in the second section on David Copperfield, we will look at the themes, motives, symbols and setting of this novel. The novel has various themes which basically make the reader identify with the novel. One of them is the state of the weak in society. Of course, Dickens was talking about the weak in Victorian society. However, it is relevant even to this day. Dickens shows that the weak in society are downtrodden, that they are in a poor state. Hence, the weak people, the people who can't rebel, who are not strong enough, whether they be kids or women or basically the poor people, all these are downtrodden in society. Hence, we have characters such as David when he was a child. He is bullied by his stepfather, he is bullied by Mr. Creakle, the schoolmaster, and even in the workplace, he is basically bullied by everyone. Similarly, Steerforth basically makes him do as he wishes. Other characters who are bullied are David's mother. She comes across as a weak person. She can't look after David. She can't protect him from his stepfather. And she too is in a poor state. Similarly, other weak characters are Mr. Wakefield towards the later half of the novel, when he is a drunkard and Uriah Heep takes advantage of his drunkenness to usurp his property. So, we can see that the weak are depicted as being in a poor state in society, and generally the strong people are the ones who take care of them. For David, it is his great aunt Betsy Trotwood who takes care of him. Wakefield is rescued by Mr. Micawber, Mr. Tommy Traddles and Mr. Dick towards the end of the novel, and these people come across as the strong persons. The theme that Dickens highlights is equality in marriage. Dickens is a strong believer that the husband and wife should be equals. Hence, David's marriage with Dora fails. David comes across as an intelligent person and a hard-working person, and also someone who is mature, whereas Dora is a pampered, frivolous girl who is childish and immature. Due to this, they can't really have a good marriage. David tries to improve her mind, but he suddenly realizes that by pushing her too much, he is torturing her. Dickens shows that David's marriage with Agnes is a successful one, because by the time David marries Agnes, he is completely mature, he has understood what he has to do in his life. And Agnes, we are shown from the very beginning, is a very mature person even in her childhood. For this reason, David and Agnes' marriage is a good marriage, whereas David and Dora's marriage is a failure. Similar examples of good marriage are Mr. and Mrs. Strong's. Though Mrs. Strong is not as intelligent as her husband, he is very patient with her and teaches her and tries to improve her in a smooth manner. Hence, their marriage is a success. Even when there are misunderstandings in their marriage, Mr. Dick helps them out. It is possible for this to happen for the simple reason we are talking about marriage where these two are almost equal. In the marriage which is a failure is David's mother's. She marries Mr. Murdstone and he bullies her on the pretext that he is trying to improve her, that he wants to inculcate discipline in her and her child. By doing this, he just tortures her and finally leads to her death and her baby's death. Thus, Dickens, through these characters and situations, show that equality in marriage is very important. Another theme that Dickens highlights in David Copperfield is class and wealth. Victorians had this notion that the poor are morally degenerate, that they deserved what they got, that they were not good enough, that they are morally weak. Dickens shows that this is not so. He projects that class and wealth have nothing to do with one's moral well-being. For instance, Steerforth is a very wealthy person and is of the upper class, but he is a hypocrite. He projects himself as a good person, but actually he is a snake. Similar characters such as Murdstone is rich but not a good person, whereas you have poor people such as Ham, who is the fiancée of Emily, and Peggotty, who are poor but are good natured. However, Dickens does not try to project that the poor are morally good while the rich are morally degenerate. No, this is not what Dickens is trying to project. He wants to show that how good you are, how virtuous you are does not depend on your wealth. So, we have Betsy Trotwood, who is good when she is rich in the beginning of the novel, and she is good even at the end of the novel when she is bankrupt. Similarly, Uriah Heep is bad even at the beginning of the novel when he is poor, and at the end of the novel, even though he had usurped Wickfield's money, he still is a bad person. We will look at a few other themes in Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. Physiognomy, hypocrisy and budget are three other important themes in this novel. The Victorians believed that physiognomy played an important role in the character of a person. They believed that if a person was disabled, that there was some deformity in his body, it reflected basically a glitch in his mental makeup. In other words, if a person is lame or blind, it suggested that he was morally corrupt, that he was a villain, and though it might not be obvious to everyone else immediately, this deformity is suggestive of some corruption in his mental makeup. Dickens does not believe in this, and this novel suggests as much. For instance, though the main characters who look good are shown as being good, there are a few characters who do not look good but are still virtuous. Mainly, David Copperfield, Dora, Agnes look good and are morally good. However, this is not the case with Steerforth. Steerforth is shown as being extremely good looking. However, we see that he is not a virtuous person. Now, why does Dickens do this? Probably Dickens wants to suggest that Steerforth does not appear as a villain, but is a villain. So, the physiognomy here does not work. Dickens shows that physiognomy is not all that important and is not all that suggestive of a person's mental makeup. Steerforth is a villain, but he does not look like a villain. Meanwhile, other villains such as Uriah Heep and Murdstone look like villains. Murdstone looks harsh and Uriah Heep looks forbidding, and his snake-like movements suggest the kind of person that he is. Even a minor character like Miss Moucher shows that Dickens did not believe in physiognomy though. Miss Moucher, the hairdresser of Steerforth, at the beginning of the novel is shown as a very minor character who hardly has a role in the novel. She is ignored and treated with contempt by characters, and even David is contemptuous of her. But it is she who helps them trace Emily towards the end of the novel. Another important theme is the importance of budget. Dickens knew the importance of budget in life due to his personal experiences. We had already discussed how his father faced severe problems because he couldn't manage his income. This novel, through the character of Mr. Micawber, shows this. Micawber tells David that if a person manages to live within his income, he is happy, and the minute he exceeds his income, his expenditure exceeds his income, he faces serious trouble. David learns firsthand that this is true when he basically yapes Steerforth and lives beyond his means. Similarly, David and Dora's marriage is not a happy one because they are not able to manage the tradespeople. All this shows that people should have a pretty good idea of their income and expenditure, and Dickens highlights the importance of budget through this novel. David becomes mature towards the end of the novel and is successful not only at a literary level but also on a financial level because he learns how to manage his money. Another theme in the novel is hypocrisy. Various characters are shown as being hypocrites. Of course, Victorian society is termed as a hypocritic society. People would say one thing and do another. They might lead pretty respectable lives in public, but do something altogether vicious in private. This is brought to the fore when we look at characters such as Uriah Heep, Steerforth, and Mr. Murdstone. Uriah Heep claims that he is a very humble person, that he is a servile person, that he is there just to serve. However, his hypocrisy is brought to the fore towards the end of the novel when he swindles Mr. Wickfield and he reveals his plans to marry Agnes. While Uriah Heep is revealed as a hypocrite towards the end of the novel, Steerforth's hypocrisy comes to the fore only after he had succeeded in his villainy. Steerforth is someone that David always looks up to. He admired him, he was in awe of him while they were both at Salem House. Even later, when David meets him, he gapes him and he admires him. However, Steerforth runs away with Emily on the eve of her marriage, seduces her and then ditches her. This shows his cruel and vicious side. Even Murdstone is a hypocrite. He sweet talks David's mother into marrying him and later shows his true colors when he ill-treats her and tortures her on the pretext of disciplining her and her child. There are three major motifs in the novel: the mother motive, the speech and accent motive, and animal motive. David Copperfield, the character, has various mother figures in the novel. There is of course his mother, his biological mother. There is Peggotty, the housemaid who looks after him. There is his great aunt, Miss Betsy Trotwood, and even Agnes, who mothers him. All these are various mother figures for David Copperfield. Now, in the novel we are shown that good mothers bring up good children, whereas bad mothers bring up bad children. Probably it is simplistic, but it is something that Dickens believes in. So, even the various stages in David's life can be shown by how he is treated by his mothers, various mothers. For instance, his mother pampers him, and David as a child is a pampered, little immature and naive kid. Peggotty also pampers him, though she looks after him. Miss Betsy Trotwood, on the other hand, not only looks after him, provides security, but also makes him responsible. Agnes, who mothers him, and whom he finally marries, basically encourages him and pushes him into this world. And David finally becomes a mature person, and it is due to Agnes' mothering of him that he changes and becomes this. Now, David's own biological mother does not protect him. She loves him, yes, but she does not take care of him. She is helpless when Mr. Murdstone, David's stepfather, is torturing him. Miss Betsy Trotwood, on the other hand, stands up to Mr. Murdstone and protects David and provides security for him. She encourages him to take up a job and she inspires him, but at the same time she also ensures that he stands up for himself. Other mothers in the novel, such as Uriah Heep's mother and Steerforth's mother, pamper their child. They make them believe that they are very important, and due to this both Steerforth and Uriah Heep grow up to be egoistical and self-important. Both of them think that they are wronged by the world in a sense. Hence, Dickens suggests a mother should be someone who is protective, but at the same time not someone who pampers her kids. Another motif in the novel is accented speech or speech and accent. Dickens shows in this novel various characters speaking in various accents to suggest that they are from various classes. For instance, Uriah Heep in the novel speaks in a certain manner in the first half of the novel when he tries to project himself as servile. He drops the H in humble and says, I am humble. By repeating this and by dropping his H, he tries to project an image of himself as someone from the lower class. He says that people should protect him and also look up to him for that he had actually grown up in life due to his ambition and hard work. However, towards the end of the novel, he speaks in his normal accent. He says that he is humble, and here the H is not silent, he pronounces it and shows that he is not from the lower class that he claims to be and doesn't need or deserve our sympathy. Similarly, the other characters who show the kind of people they are by their stress and accent. Mr. Peggotty and Ham speak in a certain manner. However, unlike Uriah Heep, they are not hypocrites. They are poor folk and their language suggests as much. Similarly, David's language, Agnes' language all suggest the kind of breeding that they have. Another motif in the novel is animals. The novel is full of animal imagery. For instance, Uriah Heep is depicted as a vulture. He is also depicted along with his mother as a bat. David says that Uriah Heep and his mother were like two bats over the Wickfield house. He is also depicted as a serpent. When David speaks about his body movements and the way he basically writhed along. Hence, Uriah Heep is always depicted as someone who is predatory, and by showing such animals, by comparing him with animals such as vultures, bats and snakes, we get an idea of what kind of a person Uriah Heep is. There are other images of predatory animals in the novel. For instance, David says that he himself felt like a spider when he tried to change Dora, and hence he decided to give up. All this show that Dickens had an idea, animal imagery would convey the right idea in the reader's mind. Various symbols abound in the novel, such as the sea, the flowers, even Mr. Dick's kite and Rosa Dartle's car are important symbols in the novel. While the sea stands for a mysterious force in the novel, the flowers in the novel depict tenderness. Hence, David is called Daisy by some of his friends, and David brings Dora flowers, Dora paints flowers, and after Uriah Heep leaves the family, flowers return to Mr. Wickfield's house. All this shows that flowers are shown as being something tender and something good. These are symbols of goodness. Meanwhile, sea is depicted as a powerful force, as a life-giving force. But at the same time, this mysterious force is something that churns out Steerforth towards the end of the novel. In other words, it leaves him out as if he is refuse. Other symbols such as Mr. Dick's kite are also significant. Mr. Dick, just like his kite, is democratic. He can go wherever he feels like. Hence, he is able to basically see to it that Mr. Strong and his wife get together again, whereas others, although they felt bad because of the strained relationship, could hardly do anything. Just like his kite, Mr. Dick can soar above petty ideas or ideologies or fears and solve problems. Similarly, Rosa Dartle's scar, though it is a minor symbol, it suggests the deep inner wound that she suffers from. That scar is caused by Steerforth, and Rosa Dartle hides it. She does not tell anyone that this is the reason that she has got a scar. However, the scar on the outside is just a hint of the corruption that is going on inside. In a sense, this is physiognomy at its worst, but this symbolism is used to depict the kind of person Steerforth is. This novel, in a sense, has a dynamic setting. Of course, by the time dynamic setting, we do not mean that David travels throughout the novel or that it is a picaresque novel. No, it is a dynamic setting in the sense that the action takes place in various places. The action begins in David's childhood home, it moves to Salem House, and from there on it moves to London, and from there on to Dover, and so on. However, the most important aspect of the novel and the most autobiographical part of the novel happens in London, the city London, and this place is what is described in detail by Dickens. Dickens shows London in its complete detail. Now, how is London depicted? The city in fiction has always been depicted as something sordid. It has been not shown as something nostalgic, something pastoral, or something that is full of innocence. It's the countryside that's always depicted as being innocent or life-giving. The city has always been depicted as something nightmarish, and Dickens similarly depicts London as a nightmarish city. He shows the various problems in London. He shows, for instance, Micawber ends in the debtors' prison in London. He shows child labour in London. In a sense, the sordidness, the squalidness of the city all come through in David Copperfield. This is not the only novel in which Dickens had described the city in such a negative manner. Even in Oliver Twist, children are forced into committing robberies, and even in novels such as Bleak House, where the Court of Chancery is criticized, or in novels such as Great Expectations, where people come with hopes to the city and their hopes are dashed, we are shown that the cities are depicted as nightmarish in London. In that sense, Dickens sets a blueprint for later writers to follow. His novels depict the city in a manner that is not really attractive. However, it is real, and the problems that he depicts are real. David Copperfield, of course, does offer some positive aspects of the city. For instance, David, while in the city, not only encounters nightmarish situations, but also befriends Mr. Micawber. and in that sense, the city does have a positive aspect. Now, after looking at the setting of the novel, we can see that the novel David Copperfield is not just a story that is well told, but has significant characters, good themes, major motives, symbols, humor, and a setting that exudes nightmarishness and depicts Charles Dickens' notions of society. Hence, this novel endures even to this day. Characters such as Micawber, Uriah Heep are popular even to this day. One for his notions on budget, and the other for his hypocrisy. Similarly, various situations such as David's proposal to Dora are famous. Even his running away to his great aunt are things that readers remember to this day. The reason readers of the present age identify with this novel is, of course, not just these themes or motives or symbols or characterization, but also because the novel speaks to us at a higher level. It shows the growing up of a character, as we noted earlier, it's a Bildungsroman. It shows the growing up of a character, his movement from childhood to maturity, and this is something that's universal. The theme is universal. The travails that he faces, the problems he faces, how he encounters them and overcomes them are all shown in great detail, and hence David Copperfield is endearing even today. Thank you.